Recording.
Oh, there's that.
That's great. You get like that.
I would like
end
to
of
continue.
that voice of doom.
This is
You know, when you watch a James Bond movie and that voice is going T minus 10.
T minus 10.
They're running.
Hattori. T
Running.
minus 10.
Running.
8.
All
Okay,
right.
guys, don't look so serious today. I will have
Hello.
for God's sakes.
Nice background some of you have there.
As
Pretty artwork.
the grade teacher said, turn that frown upside down, kids.
Smoke detectors in my hair.
Smoke detectors in your hair? Okay.
What?
You are prepared.
That was my mom. You know what I love about Feedback Friday? If you go back and watch the video, there's always one person that's forgotten to mute themselves, and all of a sudden it's like this flash of them looking crazy or something like, my head. It's always a really good beginning.
Did you find it?
But we'll have, for this week, we'll have my mom saying,
My
fire alarm is my head.
look on the table. There's these big.
I just want to also let you all know Kathy just got her sound back at 12:01. Fine.
No, I was on mute.
You were not. Christy and I were freaking out a little bit together.
No, it's just because I had to like take off my headset.
You were just trying to make me nervous for nothing. And that's
I like her scarf.
Thank you. This is from this amazing textile artist, Erica. She lives on the peninsula, Olympic Peninsula, and she does really detailed kind of folded and resisted work. She's really good at it. All right, I think we are you ready, Amy?
Kathy, I'm sort of always ready.
Okay, you're born ready, right?
No, that's a lie.
Let's go.
Are you ready? Are you ready?
So, Christy, are you ready?
Ready?
I am ready.
Okay, we're getting some thumbs up. We're getting
All
some.
right, if everybody can put themselves on mute.
Mute. I can't believe Suzanne, I don't see her for her dance moves. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna share some sound. I'm gonna share some things. Here we go.
Well, it's the end of the week. Now where you been? Well, now it's Feedback Friday, so come on in. Come sit down and stare at your screen. We got a presenter that you never seen. We're Feedback Friday, we're on the loose. We'll be the train, you be the caboose. It's Feedback Friday with Kathy and Amy. Mashed potatoes and the gravy. It's Feedback Friday all day long. Feedback, feedback, Feedback Friday.
And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Great to see everybody. It's Feedback Friday. Today is episode, no, can't be. Really?
Yes.
Episode 58.
Eight.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. Feedback Friday is our weekly show where we welcome artists, guests, other guests, scholars, growers, historians, all sorts of dyers, textile artists to talk to us about our favorite, which is natural dyes and color. I'm Kathy Hattori, president of Botanical Colors, and joining me, of course, is Amy Dufault, our director of sustainability and communications. Last week, she had put in our little tagline that we were both super awesome, but I don't have that today. I need a vacation. So I guess there's some messages coming through our intros here. So we are really, really happy to welcome today Christy Johnson of Mixed Color. And Christy's joining us from her textile studio that's located in the Catskills in New York. beautiful place if you've never been there. The studio provides her outlet to create her functional pieces, as well as serving as a platform to teach skills in sewing, embroidery, and natural dyeing so that others may do it themselves. And Christy last week had that wonderful tagline, basically, that was about, hey, will you stop beating yourself up about whether or not you're creative, because you're just amazingly creative. So she's going to speak to us about that today. She's got an upcoming book that I believe is on order with us and will be available on June 21st, which of course, is that solstice? It's closer.
I think the 23rd is, so pretty close.
23rd, yeah. So like it's just solstice adjacent, and it explores embroidery as a tool for personal empowerment and magical embellishment. And I just want to emphasize magical. So before we start, I just want to send a huge thank you out to everyone. We are into the summer season. The sun is setting at 9:02 today in Seattle. It's amazing. We're here. We're on summer. And we could not do this without you participating and supporting us. So thank you very, very much. Amy's going to be moderating and monitoring the chat on this call. So we ask everybody to be on mute until after the presentation, then we open it up. When Christy is done with her presentation, you'll place your questions in the chat and Amy will moderate that. And so Christy, you don't have to be reading chat while you're trying to answer. And the call's being recorded. We're going to have a video copy ready for you later on this weekend, as well as any other additional information and resources from this call. So with all of that out of the way, I just want to welcome Christy. Thank you for joining us. We're very excited to hear what you have to say about embroidery, threads, magic, and power.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I guess I'll just kind of start off with a little bit about my own history of how I got into embroidery, sort of all that stuff. So basically I've always been working with textiles. My mother was very much, we had a knitting machine at home, was always doing different, knitting, sewing, playing with the scraps. I'm the youngest child, so I was kind of just like, given scraps to play with just to distract me so that she could actually get some work done. Unfortunately for her, I decided to make that my career. Fortunately for me, but I think she was hoping for something a little bit more engineer based. But anyways, so I studied fashion design in college and I started working in the fashion industry, and it was just very fast paced and it didn't really feel all that much like making clothes at home did. And that was something that as I was working in the industry, I wanted to bring back into working with textiles, is the actual handmade aspect of it. And so as I was working in the fashion industry, I was starting to make my own embroideries. And I just wanted to share, this is one of the first embroideries that I did. I think this was when I was still in college. First embroideries I did that I still have and that I finished a large piece of. And after I had finished this piece, I was really upset with it because I felt like it was really wrinkly and it wasn't quite perfect and all these things were wrong with it. And the funny thing is that as I pull it out of my bag of stuff now, it's one of my favorite pieces that I own. I can just see the history of my own evolution of stitching. And I find it really charming the way that the flowers are sort of completely imperfect. And they don't necessarily fall into refined embroidery, but that's kind of what I love about it. And I find that when I'm at a thrift store or I'm going through at an antique store and I'm going through all the textiles that impress me the most are the ones that you can still see the evidence of the hand. We can still see that somebody has created this. As we kind of evolve in the future and everything is being created by machine, and machines can make things totally perfect, we start to get more and more we start to fall more and more in love with being able to tell a human made something, whether that be something that's been made out of wood or something that's been made out of thread. That evidence of seeing that a human being has touched this piece really speaks to us. And so I think that that's something that I'm trying to encourage other people to, you know, even if you don't feel like your stitches are perfect, being able to see those imperfections is really kind of incredible to look at. So as I was working in the fashion industry, I needed a lot of downtime. As anybody that's ever worked in fashion knows, it's just like go, go, go. You know, I worked one job where we worked like 28 days straight in a row, Saturdays and Sundays for 12 hours a day. So I did not work there for very long. But yeah, so I just needed something to kind of take my mind away from that and slow my mind down. And embroidery became the perfect tool for that, to be able to like really slow things down. Embroidery happens one stitch at a time. There's no rushing it. And so I started embroidering song lyrics. And so this is another one of my early pieces, and this one's Try a Little Tenderness, which I love because during this entire process, I kept kind of beating myself up because, you know, my stitches weren't matching up and things were getting tangled. And the actual words themselves that I was embroidering began to speak to me, where I was just like, okay, I need to be a little bit more tender with myself. I need to, you know, tend to this desire to move a little bit slower. And that became, I feel like this piece became really a kind of pivotal point in my own process by spending that time slowing down and stitching these words. And I think I ran out of orange thread at one point, and so I went with pink on the bottom, and I thought it was going to be, you know, a disaster, and it turned out to be one of my favorite things. I have this hanging up on my walls now. And so all that to say, you know, I really encourage people to, no matter what your skill level is, play around with embroidery and experiment with it. So as I was creating these song lyrics, I had a boss that I was working for who was like, what are these? I think somehow, I think maybe he saw it on my blog or something. This was probably a little bit pre-Instagram for me, at least like 2010. And he saw it and went, you know what, that really reminds me of this book that I love so much. It's this book called Native Funk and Flash. And so he was the first person to show me what ended up being like a huge influence on me and my work with Native Funk and Flash. It's by Alexandra Jacopetti Hart. That's Alexandra. And it's just an incredible, if you haven't seen this book, there are just so many beautiful pieces in it. And it's a collection of, you know, there's embroidery, there's sort of all sorts of different artwork there, you know, there's like embellished toilets in here. Like, it's a little bit of everything, but it is definitely a child of the 70s. This book is published in 1974, and you can tell throughout it. And as I was looking at this book and as he was showing it to me, it reminded me of all of the books that I would look at that inspired me when I was growing up. All the library books. So I would like go in the library and I would try and find like the oldest, kind of most decrepit books that I could find, because those are the ones that just felt like it emphasized my my desire to like create new things. So the craft books that were coming out in the 80s and 90s as I was growing up were very much like, this is how you're supposed to do it. This is the technique you're supposed to use. These are the colors you're supposed to use. And it felt like it made it even more obvious that I didn't have the skills to make anything. It didn't feel like it encouraged me. So when I found these, you know, these more like 1970s book where like the cover's coming off and, you know, you've got like all black and white images, and then there's an occasional color plate, and those were the books that really drove me to start kind of developing my own artwork as a kid and branching out into my own style. And so when I was reminded of these books and I was reminded of that kind of style, I was so grateful for my old boss for showing me that. And then he was like, hey, you know, what if we took some of these designs that you're doing and we made them into, you know, we had them translated into an embroidery machine, and then we had them embroidered onto chambray shirts. So this is one of the first shirts from that collection, and the collection was called Coastwide. And so this was done by machine. And the really fun part about this collection and this whole process was I had to go to these embroidery factories and work with all the employees on trying to make the embroidery machine look as though it was made by hand. So we were basically training machines to be imperfect. and to kind of, create stitches that were a little bit off, which is hilarious because it ended up someone had to go in there and adjust each and every line, each and every stitch on the programming to create these shirts that look like they were handmade. So that for me, I really started like embracing the idea of like beloved imperfections, like how these inconsistencies are the things that draw us in. They make us feel a little bit closer to it. We start to think more about like the what and the why we're stitching things, and we're not thinking as much about the how it's being stitched and how perfect the stitches are. We're really more focused on what is the meaning behind these pieces. Why am I embroidering this into my shirt? Why did I embroider these snakes on this shirt? What does that mean to me, as opposed to making sure that each of the stitches lines up perfectly, which none of them do. It was more about embracing the symbol of a snake and what that means to me. And if you're wondering, snakes for me are a symbol of transformation. They're a symbol of fluidity. They are in so many of the historical and mythological stories of snakes, they are both the venom and the antidote. They are, or the I think that's what it's, not the antidote, the whatever that's called, the venom and the healing treatment. They are both, subterranean living, and they are sunning themselves in the sun. So the way that they kind of exist between worlds, and the way that they become a symbol of transformation. And so that becomes what I'm thinking about when I'm stitching these pieces. It's not focusing on the exact precision of the stitches. So that's become something that's been really important for me. And that's also a reason I developed my online course called Magic Threads, which is all about, it's not about how to perfect each stitch and make it right. It's about learning the full potential of each different type of stitch. So how can we take these stitches and completely transform them instead of trying to, get them tighter and tighter? It's like, how can we open up and explore and just really get the full potential of a piece? So that's a little bit about why I do the work I do. That course also has tools for tuning into your own station, so different meditations, different ideas for how to find inspiration outside of the digital world, which I find to be really important in developing your own style. Is like, get out the books, go to a museum, go to a park, look at plants. There's also a little bit on developing your own color palette, working with compositions. So it's all the work that I do is based on bringing more meaning and more exploration to the process. So basically, it's not about perfection, it's about what your intention is behind it. And that's why that's a big goal for writing this book, Mystical Stitches, Embroidery for Personal Empowerment and Magical Embellishment, which I'm so happy with the way the cover turned out. The cover's all hand stitched. So the idea of, for me, what a talisman is it's all about, it's all about setting an intention with an image. So talismans are a way of telling a story. So when we set an intention for something, we are by nature telling a story of how things get to be. And so the idea behind this book, there is a whole, like, I think it's like 40 something pages of different symbols that I've embroidered, different like concepts, and how we can incorporate, like numbers, how we can incorporate different numbers into our design to include different meanings. How can we incorporate different plant elements or different, elements of nature to tell this story about how the future gets to be, or tell this story about what our intentions are. And I love that we see that a lot when we look at historical embroideries. We see the way that the embroideries are placed on the garment are telling a story about what that artist is intending for that garment. So a lot of the times you'll see, and I'm going to show you a slideshow in a second, but you'll see embroideries, focused heavily around the neckline or focused heavily around the armholes or the hem. And it's thought that a large part of this, the concept behind why that came to be, is because if you're dealing with mysterious spirits of the natural and cosmic world that you want to protect yourself from, where are those spirits going to be getting into the garment? They're going to be getting in the holes in the garment. You've got your sleeve hole, you got to protect yourself in all of these areas. And that's also another reason why, or a reason why the shisha mirror work was developed, is the idea that by having these shiny parts and sequins and anything that's like shiny and metallic, you are deflecting and distracting any sort of spirits that might want to be getting to you. And you'll see that a lot with embroidered garments for children. And certain cultures, they'll have an embroidery on the very back of a child's shirt or a child's garment, and that is to protect the child from anything coming at them from behind. So we have clearly gotten very much removed with the idea that there are spirits existing with us in this world, for the most part, but I still believe that it can be really fun to experience the world in that way. Not everything has to be this literal, rational ideas. We can still kind of explore, how can we put together these images? How can we tell a story by, maybe adding some elements around, the shape of a turtle or something, and kind of allowing these different elements to come together and create an intention. And I think the time that we spend focusing on that intention is just as important as the actual finished product. So even just focusing on, okay, what is it that I want to create here, and why do I want to assemble all these things together? So making a talisman is a way of telling a story, telling the story how you want it to be. And it's also, especially when we're dealing with, talismanic embroideries on garments, it's about the power of reinvention. Like, how can we reinvent this piece of cloth? How can we reinvent the way that we experience life? Like, I like to think of it as kind of like a macro micro concept of, like, when we are able to transform the smaller things in our life, that starts to kind of trickle out into the larger areas of our life, and we start to understand our agency out in the world. And I think that I love natural dyes too, as a way of kind of, infusing our fibers with these intentions that we have, depending on what plants we're working with or what colors we're working with even. So yeah, I love the idea of working with clothes as reinvention. And, when we're embellishing our clothing, we are working to assert our identity in the world. We are telling people, we're without saying any words, telling people what to expect from us, or what to how to interact with us. And yeah, I think that that's always been the case, as you'll see. So I have some beautiful embroideries from around the world that I've collected over the years. So first off, this is a Uzbek Uzani. I'm sorry, Uzbek Suzani. I got my my beginning of the word mixed up there. Uzbek Suzani, and they're usually included as part of a dowry. So they would be stitched up by a family of and given to a woman, or stitched up by the woman herself. And I just love this is a jacket that's been made out of a Uzbek Suzani. And I just love these pieces because they're entirely done with one stitch. So it's just this kind of style of satin stitch. I think it's actually, there's a specific name for it, but it looks similar to a satin stitch. And you can see by repeating this stitch over and over and over again, they're not getting super fancy and using all these different types of stitches. It's just one single stitch, one single motif repeated over and over again, and the impact is incredibly strong. Another example I have here, I love this one because I think it's a great example of, many of us are taught when we learn embroidery that the backside should be perfect, and I totally don't agree with that school of thought. So here is a top from Guatemala, and sorry, it's a little bit inside out right now for a reason. And so here is the front of it, and it looks like it might be woven, and it's this beautiful, really evenly created embroidery. But then you look at the inside, and it is just total fun chaos. And I often wear this dress inside out because of it, because I just love the way that this looks. But just the idea of, like, you don't have to make the backside of your embroidery perfect. And that was one of the reasons why, for my book, I wanted to share. I always love sharing the back of my stitches. And so I took the opportunity on the inside cover to share the backside of the stitches on the inside cover. And that's, I've heard a lot of sort of stories that people say where like, your stitches are only as good as they look on the back. And personally, I think this looks pretty good. And I just, I like the idea of embracing the idea that things aren't perfect. It's going to be a little bit, different here and there. So yeah, and then also in the front cover of the book, the first page, this is all the pieces I ripped out, all the stitches that weren't the right color or they weren't quite right. And yeah, all the stitches that got ripped out took place in the first page of the book as a way to honor all those failures, honor all those mistakes, and all that they taught me about my own creative process, as well as about what colors were working with one another. And that's another thing I really like to emphasize in my work and in my teachings, is that failure doesn't have, and if you've taken any classes from me, I like beat this into the ground, but I think it's really important, is that failure and mistakes, they don't have to mean anything about you. That all those failures and those mistakes do is give you information. So they allow you to say like, okay, clearly I don't, that color is not working next to that color, or, this, it doesn't mean that you picked the wrong thing. It just means that now you have a little bit more information. And the same goes with our imperfect stitches. Like through the process of creating these flowers over here that were, a little bit jagged and kind of weird looking, I learned a lot about not, what stitch I would use for that outline, and say, okay, next time I'm going to use a totally different stitch because that stitch isn't really working for me. Or, looking at the tiger and saying, I wish I had outlined that in black instead of a dark brown. Now I know next time for the future that I can change that. And I can even go back into this piece and change that. So yeah, that's been an incredibly important part of the process. And now I want to share with you, after sharing some of these beautiful pieces, I want to share my little slideshow on some of my favorite embroidered talisman from around the world, and a few more of my own works. So let me go ahead and enter full screen. Okay, is that looking good for everyone? You're seeing, okay, good. So embroidered talisman from around the world. First of all, I love this Turkmen talisman, and you can see there's this little embroidered section up here, and it's been sewn together. So these pieces, I wish I could get this at the bottom of the screen. Anyways, so these pieces, you would, within this little container, they would carry a few grains of salt or a holy verse. And so the idea of having a talisman where something is tucked inside of it, so you're stitching some cloth together and tucking something inside that, no one's going to see it. It's like your own little secret. And I think that that is something we can bring into the way that we work with pieces. I love doing a little applique and like tucking a little bit of, herbs in there or something. This is a Rushnike. I don't know how to pronounce that. I apologize. I do want to preference I'm kind of like an armchair researcher. I haven't done any field research on embroidery, but I have studied extensively through books and things. And when we're studying through books, we're studying based on who is telling the story. So where all of these are from a Western perspective, a Western understanding of these stitches. So as much as I'm giving you as much as I got basically, but I do think that's important to understand, is that, who we always have to ask, like, who's telling the story. But in this case, these are Russian or Slavic ritual cloths, and these are often called towels, Rushnik towels. And the word towel is a little bit confusing because we think of a towel as something that, we would like wipe off the counters with, and these definitely are not that kind of a towel. These are symbolic towels, and so you would put one in the window, if somebody in the house was expecting a baby, or if somebody in the house passed. They are forms of communication to one another. And though many of these sort of historical embroideries are totally infused with meaning and all the symbols, we've kind of lost touch with that a lot. Even though a lot of these embroideries have been carried through traditionally, the meaning of them has not necessarily been carried through over time. And so, yeah, there's all these little symbols have their own individual meanings. Like this one up here that looks kind of like this is a birth symbol, kind of looks like fallopian tubes. So little things like that, where we can kind of start to dissect the meanings of pieces. And diamonds are often also considered symbols of birth and symbols of new life, because they resemble a vulva. So we're able to understand it in that way. Okay, this I just love. I've been trying to find the source of this piece that's from some antiques website, but I cannot find any information of it on it. But I really just love how loose and freeform all these stitches are, and you know, there's like a cat over here and hearts over here, and this artist has added all of these different symbols around along with all of these different patches, and really created something absolutely stunning. Yeah, so I don't have any information on this one. I loved it as clearly this is a personal talisman. This was a personal talisman for somebody, and it is now an antique in somebody's collection where it belongs. All right, this is an embroidered neckline from Chad. This is from Logon Bernie. And the idea of surrounding oneself around the neckline with fishing nets, the idea of surrounding oneself with abundance. Fishing nets are a symbol of abundance because through a fishing net, you can feed a town, you can feed your whole family plentifully. And so, you know, we have these symbols that kind of have become abstracted, where we just see a net and we don't really consider what that meant for thousands and thousands of years. I love this one. This is an Iranian shawl referencing the Zoroastrian theory of creation. And so this is an exact quote from the museum. This was in the Washington DC Textile Museum, which is a very small museum that has maybe like 20 pieces, but these are 20 of the most stunning embroidered, and that's not just embroidery, there's also weaving. It's 20 of the most stunning pieces that you'll ever see. So yeah, the quote says, with all of God's creation embroidered on the shawl, the wearer inserts herself into all of God's handiwork and symbolizes the creation of humanity. And then you can barely see here, but there's a poem that the wearer has written around the circle about the creation. And now going into more modern, these are the next few are from the US. This is Alice Eugenia Ligon. I think she was from Missouri. This is a piece in the Smithsonian. And I just think these pieces are so important to take a look at, where we can start to see, you know, the kind of composite of ideas, and there's not really a reference to how tall these people are, or, you know, putting everybody in an appropriate context. This garment looks as though it was just built up on and built up on and built up on. This piece was actually made during an extended hospital stay. Apparently it was, according to the Smithsonian, it was made for her children. And I have a close-up of it in the next slide, but you can see these are just some really incredible composites of words, of imagery, of people. So being able to layer these different ideas and creating these garments, here's a close-up of it. And you know, the perfection of the facial features is not important. The perfection of the hand is not important. The minute we translate a drawing into stitches, it starts to take on a life of its own. It starts to take on meaning of its own. And we no longer have to really concern ourselves with the idea of, you know, these perfect stitches or these perfect designs, or, you know, where do the eyes fall in the face? We can really just kind of play around with it and have a little bit more fun with it. And this is one of my favorite artists. I really, there's only like one article that I've ever found about him, but this jacket is completely incredible. This is Charlie Logan. He's an American artist. I think, I can't remember exactly. I think, I want to say Milwaukee, up in Wisconsin. Some people had, you know, seen him walking, and they kind of started to interview and started to ask him these questions about the pieces that he was creating, and started keeping an ongoing conversation with him. And now his collection of pieces are at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. But I just love this piece, Never Lost the Sunshine and Roses. But we can also see here the way that he has embellished these pieces. He's, you know, fixing up the seams, he's adding to the edges, he's adding to the borders, you know, and I think it kind of echoes what I was talking about earlier about a lot of traditional embroideries being focused on these areas, being focused around the neckline, the armhole, the openings of cloth. And I think he's done an amazing job of kind of bringing that forward. Like I said, I have a really hard time finding any more information about him. But they also, I think there's a comment here. Yeah, Charlie Logan, layered fabrics embroidered with thread from unraveled socks and other textiles, incorporated found materials such as charm-like buttons and coins. His expressive costumes, which the St. Louis, Missouri, sorry, which the St. Louis artists wore daily, are a strong connection to African American folk aesthetics. They were also very personal, with letters, numbers, and shapes that referenced people, beliefs, and dates important to him. And another, the people who had kind of recorded his work mentioned also that they had asked him, you know, why do you sew the coins? And he sews coins into his pieces, or he would sew coins in his pieces. Why do you sew the coins in there? And he said, so no one can steal them, which I found to be an interesting, fun little tidbit. Okay, now it's to wrap up this slideshow. This is my new book, Mystical Stitches. It's available for pre-order now. It releases on June 22nd, 2021 on Storey Publishing. You can pre-order it through my site, or I think I have some links on there. I think Kathy also put some links up here. So here's one of the pages. This is one of my favorite pages, and I just, as a collection of natural dyers here, I figured I'd share this one. We can see how all of these different herbs have come with their own, or they have carried with them through time the history that humans have applied to them, and the experiences that we have taken from them, based either on their growing habits, based on their medicinal uses, based on shamanic interactions with these different plants. So I love this page and this combination of plants. So for one example, borage, which is this plant over here that I've illustrated in threads, borage was often sewn into the undergarments of for knights, so into their undergarments that went under their armor, and borage was thought to bring them courage. So that they would stitch little borage flowers inside. And then, you know, another like thistle. Some of the plants are very obvious in their sort of intention behind them. Thistles are pointy and they're aggressive, and if you ever kind of run into the one in the field, you're gonna feel it. So, you know, you might stitch something like that in a garment as a way of protecting yourself and as a way of kind of putting that out into the world. And this is another spread from the book, just showing some examples of how we can. I loved working with the mythical beasts because they can look however we want them to. You know, a winged horse, I can get a little wild with the way that the head looks because it's a mythical creature. And even working with other more well-known creatures like the elephant, I decided, you know, maybe this elephant's going to be a little more decorated, and maybe the sea turtle is I'm going to kind of emphasize these back pieces, these back tiles on the back. So developing embroideries as personal talisman. I just wanted to show a few examples of my own work here and how I've worked with them. So this is a mugwort embroidery that I've done, and I really wanted to look into kind of what is the history of humans working with mugwort, medicinally as well as spiritually. And mugwort is often burned as a visionary incense. It's also used as a tea to help with lucid dreaming. Mugwort is also worked with to, you know, if you soak in a mugwort bath, it's meant to soothe tired muscles. So it has a lot of connections to these sort of this calming energy. It's also considered a lunar plant because the underside, if you look at the underside of a mugwort leaf, it's got a very pale color to it. And if you even just smell a mugwort plant, you instantly kind of, it's very soothing and relaxing, and it feels very dreamlike. So I wanted to add that visionary herb idea into there. So I added the eye in the middle, the mugwort growing out through the eye, and a little bit of the moons on the side to kind of frame the piece. And here, I just wanted to share a piece that I made with naturally dyed embroidery floss. So this is the original piece that I had created, and I knew the indigo fabric that I had dyed it on was done out of an almost exhausted vat. So I knew that this indigo was going to fade over time, but I wanted to create a piece that had more of a conversation with time, that I was able to record the evolution of. So I stitched it with madder root dyed embroidery floss, which pretty much stayed the same color, but then I also stitched it with Kutch dyed embroidery floss. And so this is Kutch with iron, and this is just Kutch on cotton. And then I stuck this piece in the window for about 2 months to just get to see what the sun exposure would do. And I love to find out that, oh, and I think these were dyed, the yellow areas were dyed with fustic. It's hard to tell, but it looked pretty similar. The colors are kind of a little bit more vibrant in here than they actually are. But you can see that the Kutch dyed areas, they kind of almost, the Kutch almost got burnt in the sun. It made the colors much deeper, much darker. And that was kind of a little surprise for me. But I think it's really fun to play with natural dyes with embroideries and seeing how these different colors that I've blended in, these different dyes that I've blended in the threads turn out as a result. Here is a piece of mine, and I love, this is a piece based on the idea of rooted action. So I work a lot with different planetary archetypes, and whether or not you subscribe to any ideas of astrology or anything, I don't think is important. The idea is that these planetary archetypes that have existed throughout human experience and human relationship with the stars, these archetypes are just greater concepts. So this is based on the planet of Saturn, and that is my idea behind what Saturn influences in us, is the idea of rooted action. So we are creating what we need in the world, we are acting upon what we need in the world, but it's based in understanding what needs to get done. And so in astrology, Saturn is considered kind of, it's like the unfun dad archetype of just like, you got to get this done and you need to do your homework and you need to do this. But I think it's such an important thing to kind of include in our lives, because we need to get all this stuff done. You need to do your taxes. You need to do, these are all parts of our life that we need to get done in order to have fun. And so this concept, these swords are the swords of decision, the swords of action, and then the roots coming down here and the rays coming off of the roots. The triangle shape here being a concept of, you've got I love the triangle because it's got a really strong base. You can't knock over a triangle. And then it's pointed at the top. So we are moving in a very singular direction, and then reflecting those triangle shapes up here. And the reason I chose a tree was because that's something that is very much, it is growing, it is intentional, it is in place, it's not going anywhere, and it's, for the most part, for many years, or for many trees, it's going to be there for decades, if not hundreds of years. Here's another piece of mine, and this is actually the Atlas moth, which is one of the largest moths known to man or known to humankind. And I added these snakes up here because the Atlas moth looks like it has snakes on it. Like if you look at it, it looks like it actually has snakes on it. It's a very, very beautiful creature. I should have put one of those in the slideshow. But just incorporating, taking this moth, which for me, the moth is a symbol of transformation. It's a symbol of moving from, from a caterpillar into a chrysalis, and then moving forward into flight. So I added some eyes on there as a way to sort of give some vision to your flight, and some moons, because moths are drawn to flying around at night. And here's my last slide. So if you're interested in talisman embroideries, but not necessarily the idea of creating your own embroideries, I also offer these Stitch Wish talisman, and they are hand embroidered. I already embroidered them, and the idea is that you just sew them into a garment. So I'm going to share just some of those. So for example, this is one of my favorite ones in one of my shirts, but and this is a sword on a rib cage. And the idea behind the sword and the rib cage is, thinking about how our rib cage houses some of our most important organs. We've got our lungs and our heart, and by having that sword in the middle of it, so it's this idea of protecting yourself. And so this is something that I put on the back of a shirt, similar to what I was saying, where people would put an embroidery on the back of children's shirt as a way of protecting myself from anything that might be coming at me from behind unexpectedly. And here's another example of one of the little talisman embroideries. And this one's mycelium, and it's the idea of, bringing into mind the mycelial network that runs underground, and bringing that into like, how can we work better in community? So each one of the talisman has their own concepts that I've created, but I invite people to experience them in their own way. So yeah, that's sort of my.
Christy, that was so amazingly wonderful. When you were talking about protection, that's really great. I'm about to get on a plane next week, and I'm just thinking, oh my goodness, definitely the mask, but what else?
Yeah.
What else can I do?
Yeah, and I think it's important to think too, like I like to relate it to, let's say, like the, a lion's flanking the front of a building, or like flames painted on the side of the car, where it's bringing our intention. We're not expecting the lions to protect the building, but we are allowing that to influence our experience when, when we put those lions out there. It's a symbol that we're putting out into the world to express our intentions. Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm going to turn it over to Amy to go ahead and start asking questions.
So we have to send Kathy tons of talismans apparently for her plane her plane ride. Let's see. Okay. I just put Christy's website link in the chat too for you guys to click on. And she's got a great store that has those patches and talismans. Okay, so let's see. Let me go back up here. Well, somebody's asking, is your studio open to visitors?
It's not, no. My studio is just a room in my house. And also a chaotic basement. But I'm hoping to get it out of the house, just as a way to kind of bring that out into the world, and so that I can start doing workshops. I have done workshops in my backyard before, and I'm hoping in the next year or so to hopefully start doing that again, because it's a really nice big space. But my house is not. My house is a little bit tight, so.
Yep. That's all right. I've got my studio in the laundry room. It's a
yeah, exactly.
Okay, what is your favorite thread to work with? Your favorite thread to work with your type of stitching?
Oh, I always use DMC. That's my standard DMC. Their standard embroidery floss, so the 6 thread. I love it because it's composed of 6 threads. You basically have 6 different sizes of threads. So you can use 1 strand or 5 strands or 3 strands. So I use DMC. I also, for the naturally dyed embroidery floss, I actually made my own thread. So I took because I wanted it to be out of organic cotton, and I can't find very many organic cotton embroidery threads. So I took just regular organic cotton sewing thread, and I plied it by 6. And then I dyed those. I applied it by 6. I tried to give it a little bit of a spin, and then dyed them. So yeah, I like my own handmade embroidery floss, and DMC is my other favorite.
Great. This is kind of a longer question here, but I'm just going to read the whole thing. This is so fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm super interested in how you use textiles for storytelling, but also have written the book to elaborate on these stories. Could you share your thoughts on sharing stories through both textiles themselves and books, documenting, recording? What is your experience of them working together? Do you think that books have a role in making the stories of textiles more accessible?
Oh, yes. I love that. Okay, first of all, the words textile and text have the same origin. The word texere, which means to weave. And I just love that when we start to think about the way that they kind of really combine with one another. And as I mentioned before, I do think that as far as the older books that I have on embroidery from around the world, there is sort of an abstraction in the descriptions where I'm like, I don't feel like we're getting enough of the original source. It's kind of, there's a very sort of colonialist viewpoint of it, like certain books that I have where it's like, oh, Bolivia didn't have any style of embroidery before the Spanish came and conquered. I was like, I don't think that that's true. They were sewing pieces of cloth together. They had their own style of embroidery. It just got completely demolished. But I do think, oh, sorry, I got that. Your question was very exciting for me, so I got a little bit passionate.
Well, it was kind of a multi-tiered question, but I guess.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna, what is your experience of working with books, documenting, recording? I think it's really important to, I always try, and as I'm working on a textile, and especially as I'm working on different talismans, I try and write down what I'm doing and what the meaning is behind it, because sometimes, I made a piece for my friend for her birthday 3 years ago, and she was like, what was that, what's the plant on this piece? And I'm looking at it, I'm like, I think it's blue vervain. And it's kind of like, okay, let me go back to my notes and see what my intention for that, because as much as we like to think oh, I'll remember, I'm not gonna remember. I never remember.
Books, I know, even with natural dyeing too. I mean, I have a bunch of leaf pigments downstairs right now, and I've written coreopsis on 3 of them. I'm like, these are not all coreopsis.
Totally. Yeah, I have like, there's a pile of fabrics down there, and some of them are mordanted and some of them are not, and they're just wrapped in bundles. Like, God forbid I put a note on it that just said mordanted with simplicose or mordanted with alum, or mordant, so that is definitely something. Yeah, I do like to document and record like what I'm thinking about and what brought me to the process of each one. And I think the process of creating talisman and that storytelling aspect, it's really like, it's poetry. It's poetry in the threads that we're stitching in the end, and it's poetry in the words that we're weaving into them. And the fact that textile and text have the exact same Latin origin just speaks volumes to our experience with cloth and what cloth means to us as a species, and how important it's been to our evolution, how important it's been to our mobility, to our ability to live in different climates. I'm just obsessed with that, that kind of the importance of cloth to humanity, and where we are today. And then, do I think that books have a role in making the story of the textiles more accessible? Yes, I do. I definitely do. I feel like being able to record, if a lot of these sort of more aged embroideries that I had, like if I could know what these diamond shapes were on this, ooh, I like how that
What is
shimmers in the light.
happening? That looks amazing.
Yeah, so this is an amazing embroidery from India. I think it's from Banjara people, but I'm not entirely sure. That's just how it was labeled when I bought it, so I don't have any proof of that. But if I could know, why this artist chose to create this pattern, or why they chose these colors, and oftentimes colors based on what we have available. But I do think that being able to record a little bit with it is really important. And that's, I love too, some embroidery, a lot of quilts and things will have the artist's name stitched in it, and the name and the date. And I just like, I think that can be really important to bring back into. Yeah.
Thanks. I love this question, and I want to know too. So besides the Kutch dye, do you know of other natural dyes that become more vivid in the sun or hold up well in the sun? That was so cool how it got darker like that.
Yeah, I did not expect that at all. I knew that I knew that it didn't usually fade in the sun, but I didn't expect it to get darker. I don't know of any. Actually, I do notice that that I feel like Osage orange gets a little bit more like a little more reddy, like not red, but the color goes from that kind of bright neon yellow to a little bit more of like a rich tone. But I do think that anything with tannins in it tends to darken up in the sun a little bit. Yeah, so that's definitely anything that's got tannins in it is gonna kind of exist in the sun a little bit better. And it's important to know all those threads were alum mordanted. And so I don't know if the Kutch would have, I know I've done sun tests on Kutch without an alum mordant, and it does tend to fade faster. So, or it does tend to fade more so than burn if you don't have the mordant on it. So even though it's tannin rich, I still use a mordant on my Kutch dyes.
Let's see. Best ways to transfer designs to fabric.
Best ways to transfer design to fabric. I love the light box technique. So I have either a glass table that I use. I'll put a light underneath a glass table, or I will tape my pattern up to the window and then tape my fabric over that. Another thing, if I have like, if I have like a black piece of fabric or something, what I'll do is I will take some chalk and take chalk on the back of the paper. So let's say, this was the thing I was embroidering. I would take the back of the paper, rub white chalk on it, and kind of go like that to get any excess off, and then put that on top of the garment, and then draw on top of it with like the back of a paintbrush or something, like something pointy, but it's not going to rip through the paper. And then it's going to transfer that chalk onto your garment. And then I go back over with a white pen so that I can see that later, or like a thick white Prismacolor pencil or something. There's another thing. There's these Aunt Martha's, these pens where you can draw your pattern on a piece of paper and then iron it onto your fabric. So that's another option. I haven't used them yet, but I got them. I'm just kind of like, how do I use these again? Oh yeah, and another thing, my favorite pens are, they're called friction pens, Frixion. They have these like super cool tribal tattoo. But yeah, they're Pilot Friction, and they are heat erasable. I have heard that so you can like, you don't have to wash it out. You can do it with a hair dryer. to remove it. I have heard that if you get that garment into like freezing climates, then the color can come back. But I just use it sparingly. But yeah, I definitely use these. They come in, a bunch of different colors. So these are wonderful as a tool to draw on the garment, to draw the design and not have to worry about the line staying. So
That's
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
I know Katrina wrote about, she's got this special tool that has like for her lines for the sashiko stitching, where it's like, it's chalk and it's a roller that comes out and
Oh yeah.
stay
Nice.
like creating some kind of a straight line. Let's see.
Yeah,
Okay.
I love those. Those are so cool. I forgot about those, but yeah, I gotta get them.
I think I can fit Kathy one more question in, or yep, I'm reading Kathy's lips. All right, Debbie Bamford is in the house. All right, Debbie Bamford asks, have you looked at the embroideries of, I gotta put my glasses on. Have you looked at the embroideries of Sri Lanka? Ethel Murray is famous for her work in the early 20th century, finding and collecting and continuing the traditions. This has to be an important part of finding these steps of embroidery, no? I love the various examples you've shown in your talk. Are you looking at them in this way too?
So let me just read that again. This is what, continuing the traditions? Yeah, I definitely think that that's a big part of it for me, is understanding, especially because a lot of the places that have embroidered, cloth is the first thing to deteriorate in any climate. While your metal working, your woodworking is going to last a little bit longer, but cloth is going to deteriorate pretty fast. And so I do think, most of the antique embroideries that I have are from cultures that have mostly within the past 100 years become modernized. And so as they, as the modernization happens, you kind of throw out the old and in with the new. But I do think that luckily there's a lot of people working with these artists and trying to, make sure that these histories that basically will allow them to have their work valued once again, which is the main reason that we throw out these traditions. It's not just like, oh, let's go, in with the new. It's that they've lost their value. And so I do think that that's really important to kind of bring back the value of it and, remind the artists and remind people that are sewing that like, this is really important. This is, it's an important part of our culture. It's also important part of, I think, women, this sort of like devaluing of domestic arts in general, from raising kids and cooking to stitching. I think bringing value back to all of those is equally as important as bringing value back to our textiles. So yeah, I hope I answered that.
Awesome. There's lots
Christy,
of
that was amazing. Really incredible. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Now I really want to learn how to embroider. I'm just like, oh, how do I do this?
Oh, and I also, I have a, what was that?
And doing it like, so that you don't care if the animals look crazy or the lines aren't great, or it's the process of sitting down and just moving your hands to create something. I think that's really
totally. And I have, I just had to show a few of these on this one embroidery that I have, where I'm just like, I love these faces. I love that, like, let me put a little checkerboard in the wing there. But I do have a free resource on my website where, like, this lady, I don't know what she's doing, but I like it. So yeah, all of these incredible
being fierce.
Yeah,
she's like, very fierce.
like a tiger.
And she's next to this bull feeding a calf. I mean, this is just incredible. But I also have a free resource on my website. If you sign up for my email list, you'll get access to what I call the embroidery portal. And so it's step-by-step videos for each stitch. And I've heard from people who have taken it that it's really easy to understand for beginners. And that's basically my entire goal, is to make it as clearly laid out as possible. I think, people can sometimes kind of rush through when they're teaching it, assuming that you know how to thread a needle, assuming that you know how to. So I try and include that as much as possible.
Excellent. Wonderful. Okay.
Thanks so much.
A new thing to learn on the plane. That'll be my protection. A needle.
Yes, there you go. The needle itself.
Hala. All right. We are going to segue. Where's pictures a week? You didn't. Oh, it's at the very end. Okay.
Yes.
Hold on, you guys. Just a few reminders. First of all, Christy, thank you so much. That was incredible. Can't wait to see the book. We are really excited about this. A new skill, everyone, a new skill. We're still filling our gradient class. This is where you're taking 2 different dyes and combining them to create this amazing palette. So that's going to be here in Seattle. It's our first live workshop in a year and a half, something like that, since January or February of 2020. So very excited about that. Also, we kind of have morphed our some of our events into more of a meet and greet and just hanging out, as opposed to creating something that is beyond the capabilities of both me and Amy at this time. We're also going to be working with Eileen Fisher to sponsor a community indigo dip in August. What is the date, Amy? 22nd? August 22nd. It will be at Eileen Fisher Renew in Seattle. So if you are in the area, it's free indigo, and you are more than welcome to join us for that. We are still in our summer session with Abu Bakar Fofana. We just finished the 5-day stitching class to do Stitch Resist. It was pretty incredible. We still have scholarships available on the remainder of his classes, except I think for the construction. So both the mineral mud and the indigo classes have scholarships available. So don't be shy, sign up. We'll get to you and figure out how to include. Next week, we're going to be talking with Brooklyn-based founder of Weaving Hand Textile Studio, Cynthia Alberto. Cynthia is like one of the most charming, amazing, wonderful, loving, innovative women that I've ever met. And she's seeking to bridge traditional and contemporary weaving techniques, drawing inspiration from ancient communities of Asia, Latin America, Africa, and Europe. And she does both art and performance, all with a loom. It's amazing. She does public weaving projects to really kind of just dissolve the gap between the maker and the consumer. The consumer becomes the observer and the participator. It's really incredible. She also incorporates unconventional materials and has a zero waste philosophy. So we are excited to welcome Cynthia next week. And right now, I'm going to turn it over to Amy for picture of the week.
Week. That was a lame one this time. Okay. Melissa Moses, where are you?
Hi.
Oh. How you
Hi.
doing? I like that you've got some friends with you too.
I have my friend Kate here. Hey. Hi.
Hey.
We're doing some gardening at Kate's house. You might hear some turkeys and chickens and roosters crowing any moment.
Well, I'm gonna share the screen so we can see your picture of the week. All right. So whoa, besides the fact that it's just like the most beautiful thing ever, and that we're all obsessed with lakes a little bit, like can you talk more about what you did and some of the botanical colors dyes that you use too, which I love.
So this was a sapwood dye that I made, and then a separate perticone dye. And both of them I used the recipe in the Science of Natural Dyes. You know, the 10 grams of making the split lake with 10 grams of alum and 5 grams of soda ash. So I just used that recipe in there and then let them dry out for quite a while. And then I use that little spice grinder. This used to be one of my little mortar and pestles for grinding spices, but it's perfect for pigment because it just uses like a teaspoon or 2 teaspoons at a time. And it's the perfect amount to really grind the powder down into. And then I mix it with a little gum arabic and a little bit of water. And I use, first I use a palette knife, and then I use a glass muller. And just keep grinding and grinding and grinding until it's nice and smooth. And then you can paint with it right away, or you can pour it. There's that little rectangle thing. There's a little watercolor pot, but you can use shells or whatever tiny little vessel will hold that amount. I think that's like a teaspoon will fit in that little cute little thing. And then I just doodled away. I did one color and then I let it dry and then I painted the other color on top. I kind of really liked how they both interacted.
Mhm. I like how you just kind of like you wing things you say, but it's like it's so perfect. Mine would look like some maniac did it. It looks like it's intentional.
It's also that brush. That brush is one of my favorite brushes. It's a really good brush.
Yeah.
But everything, yeah, it was actually all of the gum arabic I got from you guys, the petitcone, the sappanwood, alum, soda ash, and then actually the recipe for grinding and making the paints, yeah, is also from the Botanical Inks books, the Babs Behan's book.
All right, I'm gonna put links to all of these things. I'm writing it down. Botanical Inks. We got Catherine Ellis, sappanwood, petitcone.
But mortar and pestle is key to just grinding it until you like just keep grinding because otherwise it's kind of gritty. It's hard to keep it, it can be kind of gritty, so unless you grind a lot.
All right. All right. All right, Melissa. Well, thank you for your picture of the week. Are you going to be at the Orleans Farmers Market tomorrow morning on Cape Cod with Kate?
Yeah, I will have some of Kate's parsley tomorrow because we just cut
oh my God.
a lot of it.
Buckets of parsley.
But yeah, I'll be at the farmers market tomorrow. I have some chamomile that I'm bringing. That's ready. I might have some bachelor buttons left. I think I might bring garlic scapes too. I think I have some, but anyway, yeah, some dye flowers and a little bit of food.
Millions of people who have swollen up Cape Cod are on this call right now, and you want to be around Orleans Mass on the gate, go find Melissa Moses tomorrow morning at the Orleans Farmers Market. Yeah.
Thanks, Amy.
All right. Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks, Melissa. So beautiful.
Thanks, Kathy. Hi.
All right. We are going to open it up to say hello and goodbye.
All right.
All right, guys. Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy.
Thanks,
Oh.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Inspiring.
Thank you.
Super.
It was really good. Thanks.
I like the idea of the snake because I'm not a huge snake fan. But
I'm
Kathy,
not.
why don't you send me something? I'll
No,
do.
I think I'll run a mile from snakes.
you know who's going to start offering naturally dyed thread is Kata Golda.
Oh, nice.
What is that?
Kata Golda. She's
Allison Kaplan. She offers all of these small kits of things that you can do for yourself or with children. Stitchery, making like that. This pouch that I wear to hold my phone. I know it's a little chewed up, but she made that and sent it to me. It's really handy. It's like a little pocket purse and just really charming stuff.
I just put the Allison Kata Golda in chat I just put the Instagram page because I just happen to have, Instagram open because of Melissa. But there's links in there that will bring you right to Kata Golda's site.
Thank you guys for the well wishes.
And I love the inspiration I get from each one of the speakers to do
I know, isn't it amazing?
Yeah, it's great.
We got a lot of projects going here.
I
All
know.
right. Amy, I'm going to run away. We're trying to find. Thank you very much. Hi,
Bye,
Reese.
Kathy.
Hi. Hey, Debbie.
Hi.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. You?
Doing all right. Yeah.
Doing all right. Okay.
On my way to
Okay.
Tennessee.
Oh, blimey. You're actually getting out and about and mixing with people.
I know. I'm like, I can just see how like antisocial I've become.
Oh.
It's incredible.
I think I've become recluse. End of.
Yeah.
Kathy, I'm having a delivery. I'm like you.
All right, Amy, I'm going to
Okay,
make
I'll
you
see you soon.
host.
Bye-bye.
Okay, take care, Debbie. Bye.
Oh, well.
Hi,
Stay
Debbie.
safe.
Amy,
Bye.
do you want to stop the recording?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, I will. It's gonna tell us it's gonna stop. You ready? Let's see if we can all hear it.